I'm friends with the monster that's under my bed. Get along with the voices inside of my head. You're trying to save me, stop holding your breath. And you think I'm crazy, yeah, you think I'm crazy. Friends with the monster that's under my bed. Get along with the voices inside of my head. You're trying to save me, stop holding your breath. And you think I'm crazy, yeah, you think I'm crazy. Well, that's not fair.
Well, hey, y'all, welcome back to church today. Want to encourage you to continue to give. You guys have been so great about this, but continue to give online. Remember that this is how we sustain everything we do, and this is how we become a blessing to as many people around us as God will allow us to. So I want to encourage you, keep giving online, and keep connecting with us online. We really, God's in this, and He's using it in tremendous ways. So you keep it up. Now we're talking about the monster in me, and we've talked about the monster in me, the monster of jealousy that can come up and can cause us to destroy our lives and the lives of people around us. We talked about the monster of anger, which obviously anger eats away at us. Now those two are very, very easy for most people to see. Listen, when we're hurt and we're angry and we're living in rage, that is extremely hard to get past. It is not an easy thing to show grace when what we really want to do is take vengeance. It's just not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing when we're jealous and we feel hurt, like we deserve something that we didn't get. It's not an easy thing to overcome those things. So I'm not trying to suggest that they're easy. I'm just trying to say that, quite frankly, most of us are really aware when one of these two things are at play. Today I want to jump into an emotion, a monster that can live inside of you that's sometimes less obvious. This monster is the monster of greed. Now, greed is really a matter of trying to take more than what you deserve in any given instance. Greed is obvious when you see price gouging. When you see price gouging at any point and people are just raising up prices because people have to have whatever the product is they're selling, then you understand that. You see that as greed. It's very obvious. But greed really is as simple as taking more than you deserve in any given situation. And it's not always clear. It's not always obvious that there's greed going on. Sometimes in our culture and in our world, what we can do is we can hide greed to the point that other people don't see it. But God always knows. God always knows what we're doing. God always knows what our motivation is. God always knows when we're doing the wrong thing for the wrong reason. Even if you fooled the rest of the world, you have never fooled God. So greed shows up in the Bible, and there's a great example of it in Acts chapter 5. Now, I want to be very clear. As we read through this scripture, this is not a sermon about giving. This is a sermon about greed and not allowing your heart to be overtaken by greed. Listen, in our culture, greed is almost praised. Greed is almost seen as a good trait. Greed is almost elevated. So we have to be very careful in our culture that we don't tip over into greed in these moments when really what we should be doing is tipping over into generosity. So I want to show you the story. The story is in Acts chapter 5. And by the time you get to Acts chapter 5, of course, you've had the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. You've had the church growing rapidly. You've had miracles being done by the apostles, and you've got all of this going on. The Lord is adding to their number daily those who are being saved. The church, this brand new birth of the church, is just becoming massive, and it is the only thing people in town can talk about. And so you get to chapter 5, and verse 1, we read this. Now a man named Ananias, together with his wife Sapphira, also sold a piece of property. Now let me pause. What we learn in chapter 4 is that people in the church, people who are followers of Christ, are selling pieces of property, and they're giving the entire amount of the piece of property to the apostles and to the church. The way is the first word, that the first name they are known by. They're giving all of the proceeds from that property to the church to be distributed to anyone else in the church as they have need. So they're being generous with one another. They're helping the less fortunate. They're helping people. They're saying, hey, this person doesn't have enough food. I own this property I'm not using. They sell the property. They bring it to the church. The church pays. The church pays to get food for the person who does not have food. That's what's going on. And so it talks about numerous people in the church that have done this, and they've given the entire amount. Now watch. A man named Ananias, together with his wife Sapphira, also sold a piece of property. Verse 2. With his wife's full knowledge, he kept back part of the money for himself, but brought the rest and put it at the apostles' feet. Now watch. The assumption here, what's not being said but is being assumed, is that he brought the amount to the apostles, put it at their feet, just like everybody else was doing, but he let everybody believe he gave 100% of the proceeds when he did not. He kept part of it for himself. He allowed his greed to look at the entire amount and then say, you know what? I think I'll keep this much. I'll give that much, but I'll let everybody think I gave the whole amount. Now, why would he do this? Because he wanted the reputation that came from big generosity, but he only wanted to give small generosity to get it. He wanted more than he deserved. That's what's going on with Ananias and Sapphira. They got greedy with this. Look, I want to show you this. Then Peter said, Ananias, how is it that Satan has so filled your heart that you have lied to the Holy Spirit and kept for yourself some of the money you received for the land? Listen, God always knows what you've done, and he always knows why you did it. God, you're not fooling God. You may fool other people, but you're never fooling God. You cannot lie to God. And God had this sin, had this bad motive, had this bad action. God brought this to the forefront by showing it to Peter, and then Peter calls him out for it. Peter says, why would Satan so enter your heart that you've lied to the Holy Spirit and kept for yourself some of the money you received for the land? Verse 4 is very important. Didn't it belong to you before it was sold? Listen to him. Didn't it belong to you before it was sold? Wasn't it yours? The answer is obviously yes. And after it was sold, wasn't the money at your disposal? Couldn't you have done whatever you wanted to with it? If you wanted to keep half of it and bring the other half to the church, that's fine. That would have been absolutely okay. Just be honest about it. Don't be lying about it. He said you had all of these options. He says, didn't it belong to you before it was sold? And after it was sold, wasn't the money at your disposal? What made you think of doing such a thing? You have not lied just to human beings, but to God. See, the sins we commit are not just against ourselves or other human beings. They are against God. And when Ananias lies like this, he is trying to gain notoriety by shortchanging God. He's trying to steal some glory from God. He's trying to get God to show him as more than he actually is. He's trying to force the hand of God in all this. And the truth is, it's not a good idea. God's not going to react well to that. When Ananias heard this, verse 5, he fell down and died. Now, everybody, wait. I am not suggesting that if you don't tithe, God's going to strike you dead. I'm not suggesting that, okay? This is an extreme example in a particular moment that I have no clue has ever repeated ever again, and the issue is not even the gift. The issue is the lie. The issue is not even the money. The issue is the motivation. The issue is, why would you lie to God and others? Why would you be so greedy as to try to steal from the church and from God glory that belongs to him when you know full well you didn't earn it? And so he fell down and died. And great fear seized all who heard what had happened. There's an understatement. Then some young men came forward, wrapped up his body, and carried him out and buried him. About 3 hours later, his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. You know, I've always told this story that she was out shopping. She had spent some of the money that look, don't get me wrong. She was probably shopping with the list Ananias gave her. I mean, they had decided how to do this, and she came back. And about 3 hours later, she came back, not knowing what had happened. And Peter asked her, tell me, is this the price you and Ananias got for the land? You see, the issue is not that they brought money. The issue is that they're claiming this was the full price. He says, is this the full price you got for the land? And yes, she said, that's the price. Peter said to her, how could you conspire to test the Spirit of the Lord? Listen, the feet of the men who buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out also. At that moment, she fell down at his feet and died. Then the young men came in, and finding her dead, carried her out and buried her beside her husband. Great fear, once again, this understatement, great fear seized the whole church and all who heard about these events. Of course there was great fear. God's striking people dead for lying to them. Now, again, I don't think that's the moral of the story. I don't think the moral of the story biblically is that if you lie to God or if you don't give the way you're supposed to, that God's going to strike you dead. That's not the moral of the story. The moral of the story is you need to not let greed steal your honesty from you. Watch. Why did they want this? They wanted this because they wanted the rest of the world to look at them as more than they actually were. Well, I've got to tell you, you've got to understand something. My honor is not more important than God's glory. Now, our world sees this entirely opposite. Our world believes that my personal honor is the most important thing in my life. Our world would say, do whatever it takes to bring honor to yourself. Our world would actually excuse, quite often, I got to be honest, our society today would actually excuse greed, excuse negative motive, would excuse lying, would excuse cheating, would excuse a lot of that as long as it got you where you wanted to go. But my honor, people honoring me, people looking at me and thinking of me as higher than I am or more than I am, my honor is not more important than God's glory. The most important thing I could do in my life is bring glory to the God I serve. And if I put my honor up before His glory, I'm never, ever going to serve Him properly. It's just not possible. I'll keep trying to steal His glory to uphold my honor. That won't work. That was the motivating issue that God had with the whole thing. That's why the outcome the way it was. My honor is not more important than God's glory. My comfort is not more important than God's call. See, Ananias and Sapphira, they sold this land. They had this money, and they obviously kept part of it because they wanted to go buy something that would add to or pad the comfort in their own lives. They were going to go do something, I don't know, a new sectional for the living room, a new bedroom suite for the. You realize I'm making things up, right? But somehow they wanted to keep a piece of it to add more comfort to their lives. Listen, God had called the church to take care of the needy. God had called these believers in this time frame to take care of the needy among them. And they were doing everything they possibly could. They were doing everything in their power to make good on God's call. And Ananias and Sapphira said, well, yeah, okay, maybe that matters this much. And they kept the rest of it for themselves, for their own comfort, and then just tossed God a bone along the way. That is not how this is meant to work. Look, sometimes God's call in our lives actually demands that we act in sacrificial ways in order to accomplish what He's called us to do. And when you are being sacrificial, you are necessarily not comfortable. I'm not suggesting that God is always, every time, calling us to give till it hurts. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying there are moments. There are moments when that's exactly what God calls us to do. He calls us to give till it hurts. And when we give till it hurts, it means that comfort is left. Comfort is gone for the moment. God will reestablish the comfort in our lives. We can trust Him to take care of us, but if we put our comfort above His call, we'll never really accomplish what He's called us to. We'll never actually experience His best in our lives, because what we're after is protecting our own comfort instead of doing what He's called us to do. Our honor is not more important than God's glory. Our comfort is not more important than God's call. And my story is not more important than God's truth. God gives us His truth, and that's what we're spreading to the world around us. If I'm more worried about my story than I am about God's story, if I'm more worried about how, in the end, who are they going to give glory to? Whose story are they going to tell? They need to tell God's story. No, Pastor Mike, I want them to tell my story. No, that's greed. That's asking for more than you deserve. That's asking for more than you've earned. It's God's story. We just get to play a small role in it. God will take care of our glory if we take care of His. We need to bring glory to Him. We need to serve Him. It needs to be about His call, His honor, His glory, His story. Because it's not our story to tell anyway. The truth is, folks, whether it's in reputation, whether it's in dollars, whatever it is, when we demand, when we reach out and take more than we deserve, we act in a spirit of greed. And listen, no, God is not dropping people dead up at the offering plate at the end of the service anymore. That's not happening. That doesn't happen. But man, greed that is allowed to take root in your heart will destroy, will kill any hope of peace, any hope of fulfillment, and any hope of joy that you have in your life. You have got to let God, let His glory, His call, and His truth drive your life forward. Otherwise, you're going to find that your hopes, your dreams, listen to me, your reputation will drop dead at the foot of God's call and God's purpose in your life. Because you didn't do it right, you'll mess up what you're trying to do. But, if you will allow God's glory, God's calling, God's truth to drive, then God will lift you up. He will elevate your honor. He will give you comfort, and He will give you a story worth telling. Listen, folks. You might think you got the best plan, but I'm here to tell you God's plan is always better. You just have to trust it.